This time, hopefully, I won't mess up as badly because I went on for about 10 minutes and didn't have the audio working. Just give me two seconds. I'm gonna go and find the old stream. Might actually have to break out. I'm gonna have to break out the laptop across the room, aren't I? Ugh. And I'm gonna have to put it in. So, for those who nobody was able to tell this because I was muted for 10 minutes and wasn't aware of it. But we were going on about. We were talking a little bit about the. Basically the economic situation around raising children and issues of that sort. We were talking a tiny bit about. It actually just gotten onto the section about how it impacts career and finances. I'm surprised how many people actually showed up to do it. Okay. Just announcements. Everyone. Post chat. That was daft. Oof. Okay. Hopefully this time I can actually be heard. I'm gonna see if. Let's see if people are actually gonna be. Maybe I can even go into the live chat for the old one. Don't think I will be able to, but that's not great. Bruh. Okay. So I'm just gonna have to reiterate. Okay, wonderful. You can hear me. Okay. If you guys are still in the old chat for the old stream, please, by all means, include this link. Okay, we've got 4 people, which was more than what we had before. Okay, so this time I can actually be heard. Thanks be to God. Okay. Which is probably pretty good because I was kind of ranting, I feel, about where I was. So today we're basically going to be talking about the practical aspects of raising children, and we're going to talk a little bit about relationships because I figure a lot of the people here that are watching, 4th dimensional conditioning, no more, indeed. So the main 2 things that I was going to cover, I've already covered this 3rd thing as well that I'm going to talk about, are going to be people who are afraid that it's going to be too expensive to raise children, and people who are afraid of it impacting their careers and impacting hobbies and, like, spare time and things like this. That's going to be the take here. It's going to be for people who... it's going to be for people... I imagine most of you are probably single men. There might be the odd woman watching this. But most of you are going to be single men, but this is going to cover the actual practicalities of raising a family. So, for some context, I've been married now for a little over 2 years. We have 1 son. He is 14 months old. He is very, very active. And we will, likely the family's going to expand. So, we are, in terms of our income bracket, to let you know, we're earning as a combined family income in the lower half of the economic spectrum. It makes sense. We're both in our mid-20s. We both have kind of entry... maybe not so much my wife, but we both have entry-level positions. She's part-time, I'm full-time. We're earning not a great deal of money. I'm a software developer, by the way, Stephen. So I'm a junior-level software developer. I could probably go and get a mid-level at this point, but I'm at the upper end of junior, I would say. So not earning huge amounts of money, yet people in Britain are always talking about how much money things cost, and it is expensive. But to be honest, even being in our mid-20s and not earning a great deal of money, we actually have quite a lot of financial freedom, and we have quite a lot to play with. And I'm not quite sure, and we were actually discussing this, my wife and I, because we were discussing how this is going to play out. And basically, Stephen, I would not recommend making 6 figures. You don't need to. But I'll get into that in a moment. So I'm 26 for reference. Like, by the time I'm 30, I'll probably have 3 or 4 kids at this rate. And you don't need the money at all for it. We're putting away at least let me think in terms of we're putting away about 20% of our income in savings, even earning as little as we are, and that's not an insubstantial amount of money each month. Maybe 15% actually. I think about it. We're putting away a decent amount of money. We're still able to live a full life. We go out quite a lot just to eat with the little boy, and everything's hunky dory basically. It's not a hellscape like I think a lot of people are worried about who don't have children. You will still be able to afford things. You just have to be a bit clever about it. So, for example, somebody who does not have children might go on to say John Lewis. John Lewis, for those who don't know, if you're an American, it's a department store. I think they call it in America. Basically, they sell furniture, they sell amenities. They also have like a food section called Waitrose, and it might cost you something like £600, £800 for a pram. So for those who don't know what a pram is, it's something that you stick a baby in and you wheel it around. I don't know what they call it in America. Now, it may cost you £600, £800 to buy that. It might be very expensive on the face of it to buy a coat for a baby. You might go to John Lewis and buy him a coat, and it might be £40. Ridiculous money on the face of it, and you're thinking maybe you're earning. Maybe, let's say you're like a mid-level software developer, so you're bringing home maybe £3,000 a month after tax, maybe £2,600 after taxes. You think, well, how can I possibly afford that? Well, the solution is fairly simple, because really, if you go and you buy second-hand things, and they're often very good quality, I wouldn't trust them for things like a car seat for a kid, or maybe even like a cot. But for a lot of things, you can save a lot of money. So, for example, probably what would have been the largest expense we would have had would have been a pram. Because the prams, like the pram that we have, I think new was something crazy like £600. Baby carriage here in the colonies. Okay. It was £700, so for American ears, that's about $850. Crazy prices, right? But because I married a woman who is very thrifty, and very she's not formally financially educated, but she's a very thrifty woman. We were able to find the same pram pre-owned. We just walked and grabbed it. It was in our town actually. We got it for about $80, so £60 for those in the UK. We just went through Facebook Marketplace. The both of us walked over there one night. We went and grabbed it. We carried it home, and that was how we saved, a week's salary. just because my wife is very thrifty, and that is really how you save money. Because children don't need these luxuries. Like if anything, we've given him too many toys. Given like what he needs. My son is perfectly content. He used to be perfectly content playing with like a crisp packet. He'd prefer playing with a crisp packet to a good chunk of the actual toys that we bought him, just because it makes crackling noises, and he loves the crackling noise. Like there are certain things that he loves that you'd have to buy those. So things like toy trucks, toy tractors, stuff like that. And you can buy those very, very cheap. Our single largest expense with our son, besides his cot, which we bought new for about £300. So that's what, $350 US. Toys by far. And that's mostly because the wife watches Instagram, sees the Instagram mums with their various toys, and wants to give him the best life that she can, and she gives him a very, very good life. Like we don't earn much, but he's living probably better than a lot of the richer kids. Mostly because the wife is there with him, actually, just looking after him. Like his mum is with him a lot. Yeah, he enjoys himself so much. And Augustus makes a very good point. Second-hand clothes are somewhat of a good investment if you know where to look. Yeah, exactly, right? So, a substantial proportion of my son's clothes that he wore in his first year of life, we didn't buy new. We bought them pre-owned. We got a whole bag of them, big bag of them, and it was about $10. Like, it was £8 on Facebook Marketplace, and he was fine. There were a family that contributed stuff as well. So, for example, he had a coat that was about, I don't know if it was about 25 quid from Tesco. Loved the thing, right? Was wearing it all the time, right? Like, children are really not that expensive. And I think that will probably extend when the children are older as well. I mean, it's much more now, given we don't have to pay for things like train tickets. But, educating a child doesn't cost that much money either. If you want a kid to get very good at mathematics, you want to, I reckon that the average parent, if they're willing to sit down with their kid, could absolutely outperform even the best schools in this country. Because I was reading a book, I've forgotten the name of the book. It was on mathematics education. And it turns out that just like having a tutoring one-on-one situation with a child makes the child perform like outperform 99% of students in a classroom, right? And the stuff they teach them in school is not that hard. You could probably get like a 12-year-old doing calculus if you set them up correctly in the previous years, right? And all you really need to do, at least with mathematics, is just give them a whole load of example problems to work out, and then they build up the automaticity to be able to do them well, and then they smash their exams. Right? It really is as simple as that. And I think the same principle applies probably to most things. It certainly applies with languages. I mean, I already have all of the books here I need to teach my son ancient Greek and Latin. I could probably teach him Spanish. I just need a grammar book and YouTube. I mean, it's really, really quite simple to teach him these languages. Yeah, like a lot of first through eighth grade subjects are often repeating topics. Yeah, just going over and over again. I mean, we must have done thousands of quadratic equations at school, and that's really how you get good at them. So I imagine this extends far further into the future. Like, you don't have to spend money with children. The thing that matters a lot more, and even then not that much, is time. And so we get on to the second topic of the stream, which is really, I'm frightened about losing my hobbies and losing my career because of my children. Now, for women, I think this is a legitimate concern, because really, to take care of a child as a woman, I mean, women are just simply much better suited to raising a child, not because of any kind of nurturing disposition, which is true. Like, my wife is a lot more merciful to my son than I am. But because, I can't breastfeed my son. Quite frankly, I can't lie there and put him to sleep like my wife does. Like, I'll rock him back and forth. It might take me about, on a good day, he'll take about 3 or 4 minutes to go to sleep. What we do is we have an Alexa that my mum bought us. I know, spying device. And we just put on music, and I rock him back and forth, and we walk back and forth, and it will take, sometimes it will take as little as 2 minutes, and he'll be just out of it. And then what we'll have to do is we get into the process of just lying him down, and my wife will lie with him for a bit and look after him, make sure he's, comfortable. And then she sometimes gets up, sometimes she just stays there. Often it's better if she just stays there. Sometimes it can take as long as half an hour, and then he refuses, right? Like, with children, at least with babies, they can take quite a bit of your time. And they will certainly take your sleep at certain periods. But this doesn't mean that you're going to be unable to learn things. And it certainly doesn't mean that you're going to be unable to develop in your career. Because, if you have a wife who is willing to go part-time, and really it ultimately comes down to this, like, have you picked a wife that is nurturing and cares about your child? Because if you're going to... And I understand completely, if you fall in love with a party girl, I mean, please don't marry her. If you fall in love with a career woman, I mean, if you can get her to focus her drive on the child, that's fantastic. But really, a lot of this comes down to having a good and stable partner. And, if you've got a mother who really is a mother, who will really sit down and look after the child, then you will have time, and you'll probably have time anyway when he's sleeping, to develop your career and to develop your intellectual life. So, for example, while my son has been alive, I've been able to develop my skill in the Greek New Testament to the point where I can read the Gospels and certain other books of the Old Testament. Now, Greek is a hard language. Greek is really hard, actually, because it's very... it's grammatically not much different from something like Latin, which is quite grammatically different from English. But the problem is that there's a lot of words that you don't know, and so you need a lot of time to sit down and read it. I was able to go from like knowing the alphabet and like the oddest, like the smallest bits of its grammar. Like, you know, I spent like maybe 5 or 6 days looking at it previously, to being able to pick up a New Testament, admittedly with some of the words glossed, and read it, you know, relatively comfortably in that time, and many other things besides that. Like I teach a Latin class to a bunch of people who are interested in Latin. I'm able to work as part of a charity in that capacity. You know, there's lots of things I can do, and I hold down like a full-time job, all while having a child. Like you can do plenty. It's just a matter of being disciplined and conscientious about it. There are certain things that you're not going to be able to do though, and really, I think that these things are fairly obvious. Like, you can't be a party girl or a party boy with a kid. That's first of all, it's degenerate behaviour, and second of all, you have to put the baby to bed at some point. The baby will wake up in the night. You know, there'll be nights. Like he's the little man is teething at the moment, we think, and he's been up from about 5:30 until about 6:30. I would say 3 out of 5 nights. No, 3 out of 6 nights this week, and that's just for me. That's not for my wife, who's constantly up with him, looking after him, because he'll often wake up in the night. He'll cry for about 2 minutes. He needs a bit of comfort, and then, you know, he's out of it and he goes back to sleep. You know, she's waking up constantly, like little breaks, and then going back to sleep again. I mean, it's not as much as I think the average British person does, because the average British person just puts their kid in another room and has the monitor, and then he cries, and then you've got to go up and do that. We have he sleeps next to my wife, and so she just turns, looks after him, and then he goes back to sleep usually. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he's a complete like nightmare for an hour or so. But yeah, you can't live the party lifestyle like that. And to be honest, I don't think that anybody should want to live the party lifestyle anyway, because I mean, I don't know if this is just the way I'm thinking, but I suspect a lot of people are at these parties not because they really want to be there, but because they want to meet a woman so that they can get married and settle down, or because they're trying to deaf something out, or they just want to feel cool, which really none of these things do anything. I mean, maybe you could argue that you'd meet a good woman at a party. I mean, I know I used to think that you could meet a good woman at a bar. You probably could, but there's going to be a lot of terrible women there. But you're not going to be able to live that kind of lifestyle. I mean, if you're taking like hard drugs or something like that, I mean, obviously you shouldn't do that around a kid. But you can't live that kind of lifestyle. You can't be getting drunk constantly. You can't be. I mean, you can have like some flaws. Like, for example, we eat a lot of takeaway, which is really bad. But often we just feel kind of knackered from. I mean, frankly, I'm a desk job. I'm a software developer, so I'm sat here all day. I tend to prioritize learning things over exercising, and so I'm exhausted. Like physically, and so often we'll order something maybe once or twice a week. We can cope with that financially as well, like relatively easily. So a lot of this is going to be. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions, ask them, and I'll answer them. Rafael Alfonso, it's rare, but it happens. I have a friend who is now in a healthy relationship with a very Catholic girl. They met at a party. Yeah, I mean, you know, you could meet a decent girl at the Catholic society at your university. I've heard one person suggest early childhood, people doing degrees in early childhood and like primary school education. Like my wife didn't do that, but she had an inclination in that direction, and it's been I don't know if I'd say helpful, because I don't have anything to compare it with, but she's certainly been very invested in reading the childhood nurturing books on psychology, because I mean she's got a bachelor's and a master's in psychology of various forms, and so she can interface with this literature, and you know I hope it's helped Elisha, my son. But yeah, you can't live a party lifestyle. You can't. I don't think, and this is specifically for software developers, I don't think you'd make it in a startup environment where they're expecting you to work 10, 11 hours a day. I mean, I don't think that's good. I mean, I'd never do that anyway. I mean, I worked at one once, and I lasted about 3 months before they kicked me out, because frankly, I clocked in the exact amount of minutes and the exact amount of hours they wanted me to, and the other people on my team spent Like, they were saving up for later, but they were doing like 10.5 hours of work a day. I wasn't about that, and I didn't really get on with the people there, quite frankly. And I probably wasn't competent enough for them, honestly. Well, I mean, that's what they said. I think it was a bit more than that, but hey ho. Right, but like, I don't think you can go into a startup as a father or a mother when you have a child like that, because they're going to put a lot of demands on your time. So like very careerist kind of jobs. Like if you're a doctor or like a ER doctor, I don't know about GPs, but I don't think you could do a very good job as a doctor while being a parent. Maybe working on oil rigs, that'd be something that would be kind of out. You want a relatively stable job. Like, this isn't to say that you couldn't be something important. You know, you could do middle management perfectly fine. Many people do. But you know, C-level management. I mean, if you're competing with all these like psychos at the top, that's going to be quite difficult, and that'll have an impact on the children as well. So like, I think ultimately, like a lot of the time, these sorts of desires aren't driven by the best of intentions anyway. But you know, like being a decent parent and holding these roles are things that I think would be difficult to reconcile. I think that you probably could for some of them, but it's going to be difficult, because really, like, the best thing that you can give your kid is not, you know, flashy toys and stuff like that. I was muted for this, but I found that in at least his first year, the little one got a lot more entertainment out of playing with a packet of crisps. So like in the US you have Lay's, we call them Walkers in this country. He got a lot more entertainment playing with an empty packet of crisps than he did with half of his toys. So he'd just like be crackling it around, and he loved the sound of the thing. Like, like how much is that? You know, peanuts. He doesn't need that. But what they do need is, you know, a parent there to, you know, be there. Like, they need to have like a decent attachment, and I think that's one of the things that fails. So, for example, one of the things my wife is very, very serious about is just not putting the child in care, because it will lead to long-term worse outcomes. If you are, you know, you should take the salary hit so that you can be with your kid. Your kid doesn't need the flashy holiday, they want you there. And it will help them long-term anyway if you are there, even on a purely material basis, because if you're sat there with your kid when they're like 3 or 4, teaching them how to read and write, and giving them the motivation to pray, and you know, just teaching them their skills at school. Because to be honest, you're going to out-teach the teachers in almost every single situation. Not because you have some fancy degree or something like that. I mean, I don't think that the degrees are probably equipping the teachers as well as some people would like to say. That's just an inkling of mine. But merely because you have your attention on one kid and not 30 means that you're going to have a much better idea of where the kid is. And so that means that if you're willing to put the time in as well to look into how to develop his skills or her skills, that you can place them in a position where they're going to just get better results, because they're going to be better handling what they're thrown at. Because you can say like I'm not communicating this very well, but say for example your kid has a serious problem with division, you know, dividing in mathematics. You know, you might think, well, maybe it's better that my son memorize all like a table of divisions between like you know, from 1 to 6, and then maybe as they memorize that, they'll be able to see intuitively how the division actually works. Or, you know, like my mum did, she sat down with I think she sat down with an orange or something and showed me how it worked. And I had real problems with it when I was like 5 or 6. Right, and she sat down patiently and she taught me. And if you're able to do that with your kid every day, like one thing I think as well that is suggested for people trying to develop children's English skills or their language skills is free voluntary reading. We had this in my primary school. We'd get assigned a book and we'd read them. But the thing that builds up higher levels of verbal intelligence is just reading a lot, because when you read a lot, you get access to the more sophisticated vocabulary, and that enables the child and you, by extension, like the ability to express yourself better. So if you have, say, an hour a day where the entire family just sits down and reads, or maybe you read a book together and discuss it. Spend, say, I mean, they say, as much as 10 minutes can make a serious difference for deprived children. I mean, I imagine for the average child it would be a bit more time than that, maybe half an hour, because of the way that the frequency of words shows up. But if you just sat down for half an hour with your kid, instead of working, the extra 2 hours in your middle management position to get the PowerPoint sorted out for your senior management boss, sit down and read them that it's gonna help the kid a lot more than any money that you earn in that situation. Because what are you gonna bring in, like an extra £100, maybe? That's nothing on just sitting down for an hour or two and teaching your kid the difference between onomatopoeia and a simile and a metaphor, right? Because these things are ultimately going to help the kid to develop in their understanding of English, therefore their ability to express themselves, therefore their ability to consider the world around them, not just so that they can earn more, but so they can interact with the divine more. So that's really the thing. Money, in terms of money, children don't cost much. So Stephen Broughton, you want to make 6 figures before you have kids, you don't need it. I'm earning far, far less than that. And we're able to be perfectly fine, and we will probably be perfectly fine even if we had another kid. So you don't need to worry about that. One thing that might be worth considering is space. We have a flat, and it's a bit on the more expensive side, at least as far as I'm concerned. But, we have room we could have a family of 4 in this flat. And that's the only thing that might be worth considering financially. But food, good food is really more of a matter of time. Like, it's going to be the time that you put in more than it is the money. Augustus asks me, what second language will you teach your children? Latin, almost certainly. I think I could probably teach them. I think we could probably learn Spanish as well, because Spanish is quite easy. But like Latin is the language that I have the most skill in, I'd say. Like, I can speak it to some extent. I'm not like somebody who speaks in a classical dialect. I'm very much a Vulgate kind of person, because I got all of my language in the Vulgate, and I honestly struggle with some of the more difficult stuff. So, for example, like I can read the Genesis or Deuteronomy almost like it's English, but when it comes to like classical Latin, like Cornelius Nepos or something like that, it's kind of a struggle. But I can talk. Hopefully the connection hasn't gone down. I've just noticed it's going like that. So yeah, it would be that. But like I can expand that over time. You've unironically presenting the point of Jules Payot in his book Intellectual Work. Lol, it's a very good read. I don't know why my internet's doing this, but I apologize if it's causing issues. I've never read that book, but it's interesting that what I'm saying is showing up. Driver X says, my sister is working a minimum wage job and her fiance is doing 25k euros annually. They get by just fine with a kid and have a second on the way. Yeah. We're earning more than that, but it's very much the same experience. We can live very well. We could afford a car if we wanted to. We might not be able to afford the second kid if we had a car, but we could have a car if we wanted to, if we could drive, right? Like, you don't need that much money to raise a kid. If you want to have a family, you can do it without doing crazy money. You don't need to throw the kid through tons of education. Really, you could probably educate your kid better than he'd be educated at one of these highfalutin private schools just by sitting down, working out a curriculum on your own, spending the 10 minutes, an hour you need to brief the kid, and then just throwing them at the books, right? Like, the use of school, I think, is fundamentally... there's two main functions for schooling at this point, at least formal schooling. The first one is kind of as a rite of passage, your HR stamp. The reason I went and did my degree wasn't because I thought that my degrees would help me in terms of my actual skill, but because it was an HR stamp. I have a graduate degree in advanced computer science, and that makes me seem like a boffin. It makes me seem like I'm like this hyper-intelligent, hyper-autist, and you can hire me, and I'm going to, I'm just like that brilliant, right? Now, I don't think many people believe that now, but there are certainly a lot of people in HR who would assume something like that. And they're certainly going to think I'm not stupid if I get that. Like, it's a rite of passage. And the second one is so that you get contacts. Like, contacts are extremely important. Like, the more I work in my my job as a software developer, the more I realise that not only is the process of writing the software itself a rhetorical skill more than it is a mathematical one, but also just having these rhetorical skills and being able to interact with people is just so important. So, like, being able to read, like, reading Aristotle's rhetoric might be, like, a seriously good career move for any software developers, or really anybody here. You know, just knowing... I mean, I didn't appreciate some of his tone in places, because it sounded like he was sort of advocating a kind of dishonesty. But, you know, just knowing your audience, being able to communicate with them in the way that they want, and being personable and being virtuous are supremely important things. And much more important than cramming out another framework or something like that. But that's kind of me getting off the point. My point is for this entire stream is that you do not need huge amounts of money to raise a kid. What you need more than anything is time, the willingness to put time in, and really a good wife. Like a very good wife is something that's necessary. So I'm gonna give you about 2 seconds to come up with any questions before I get onto the third section, which I'm going to talk a little bit about getting married and finding a woman. Because I imagine that most of you are in that situation more than you are countenancing how am I going to raise this kid. And we'll talk about that. So I'm going to quickly fill up my coffee. I'll be 2 seconds. Come up with any questions and I'll get onto them. I don't have any fancy screen to show, so sorry about that. Right, okay. Doesn't seem we have any questions. So, moving on to the issue of finding a woman. Now, I happen to think that I think there's a lot of people out there who say that they are going their own way and avoiding getting married because of the state of women. But really, the amount that they talk about it is they really do want to be married, but they just don't believe that they can be. And I want to tell you right here, right now, that that's false. You can cite as many statistics as you like. There will always be exceptions to that, and where there's a will, there is a way, right? So you know, you can have 2 possible responses to this kind of statistic. You can look at the statistic and think, well, I'm going to be unhappy. Actually, you can have 3. I'm going to be unhappy. I'm going to talk about it online, and I'm going to, you know, excoriate and like whine, or maybe will basically complain about the state of the situation, and just dwell in misery. I know somebody. I've seen multiple people in my comment section basically just whining about the situation and saying, well, society doesn't deserve us because it's deserted men. It's like I mean, if you're going to take that attitude, that actually just tells me that you are somebody who's probably not worth being around anyway. Because if you're going to whine about something like this and not actually pull your finger out and do something about it, that just suggests that there's a certain weakness there. So that's the first thing you could do. The second thing you can do is go, like, look, yeah, it's unlikely that I'm going to get married, so I'm going to become chaste so that I can control myself, and I'm going to devote myself to God. Now, this is the best path to take. Like, this is better than getting married. St. Paul says so. Isaiah says that, you know, the eunuchs for the kingdom, I'm paraphrasing here, it's in Isaiah 56, will receive wages better than children. And that's a very respectable royal path. If you are able to control yourself sexually, which is not many men, we have to be honest. Like, if you routinely even entertain pleasure in looking at a woman, you are not capable of doing this because that's mortally sinful. Like, if you're aware of it, and like aware of the level of sin involved, right? This is a remarkably small number of men, but yes, if you have that quality, as St. Paul says, go ahead and do that. UK is finished leave now, everyone. I mean, that's the thing. It's the defeatism, and I see this. You know, people just complaining. Like, yeah, the world is imperfect. But then, then there's the third thing. It's like, right, there are certain things that are going to incline me towards being more likely to getting married. Some of those things are actually things that you might find very surprising. So it's not just like looks maxing. I mean, I didn't looks max and I got married. I mean, look at me. My beard is at a 45-degree angle and I'm still married. Right? I didn't looks max. But there are certain things that do, like kindness, humility. You know, I mean, the one thing that we really lack as a society is humility, and it shows in like the complaining. I mean, actually, this is a separate. I shouldn't indulge in this myself because it is a kind of complaint on my part. It's a kind of complaining and an effeminacy on my part. But basically, you can look at the situation and go, look, women are awful. And yes, they are awful. I mean, a lot of them are horrible human beings. A lot of them will be terrible mothers. A lot of them are really undisciplined. You know, a lot of them can't even cook. And, you know, the women watching, yes, men have similar problems, but of a different capacity. You know, they're cowards. Many men are cowards. Many men themselves can't cook. How can you raise a family in degenerate Britain? Well, easily. I'll just produce the kid and I feed it. But there are people who do not fit that, and if you are gonna follow the things that incline the best to long-term relationships, which are going to be humility and kindness flows out of humility, then you're gonna stack the cards in your favor, and so then eventually you will find someone who is worth being with. Because my wife has joined the chat. She's called True Trad Waifu. She's called True Trad Waifu. The son is crying. I can hear him in the other room. But yeah, like if you just behave in such a way that's going to attract the small number of women who are worth being with, then you're just increasing your chances. What do I think about the low birth rate? I mean, I think if people stopped murdering their children and using contraceptives, we'd be in a much better situation. If people followed the basics of like Christian or even just like natural law, sexual ethics, we'd be in a much better situation. That's what I think about it. But this kind of disrupts the thrust of my argument. So, we have to be honest with ourselves. Virtue is really attractive. Yes, of course it is. I remember a friend of mine at university observed with women this thing called the Darth. It's not Darth Sidious. Senator Palpatine effect, right? Where you'd get women who had been at sixth form college or at the secondary school, and they came in and they looked very attractive because they lived lives that were more constrained. But because they ended up in university and they were constantly on drugs, getting on alcohol, depression, because let's be honest, I don't think that most of them are very happy, their faces start to sag. So you can see when issues of intemperance hit a person. And virtue tends to cancel that out. That doesn't mean that virtue is going to make somebody attractive inherently, physically attractive. I mean, it will make them personally attractive because it's a much more pleasant experience to interact with a humble person than it is with an arrogant one. But it also has a physical impact as well. So really, you can take those three approaches to the issue of most women are terrible. You can either become better and so attract the women who are worth being with. You can whine about it and degrade and gnash your teeth and perish in misery. Or you can decide, I'm going to discipline myself sexually and become a monk. And I think that the monk is the best way. How can you expect people to live a virtuous life in modern Britain? People love sex. Indeed, they do. But you know what's better? Virtue and charity. And people don't realise that. People think that sex is wonderful and they don't have any experience of anything better, but there are better things. God, for example, is better than sex. Virtue is better than sex. There's a certain satisfaction of achieving a high level of skill in something that is completely different. I have slept with over 20 women and I'm 33. What is the problem with this? Because that's effeminate, quite frankly. Like, you couldn't control yourself. Like, that's the problem. Like, it's a problem of self-control. You know, how many men here could really resist that? How did I find my wife? I actually met my wife through Discord, of all places. Yeah, like, but sleeping with over 20 women, I mean that also sets you up, like, with women who are worth being with as somebody who's utterly unreliable. So, you know, how can you expect to establish a family if you cannot have the self-control to stay with one woman? And really, like, the satisfaction of children is going to be so much better than anything you ever gained out of one-night stands or with girlfriends. Really, I think... Through my own Discord? No, it was through someone else's. Looks max, books max. I think there is some hoes going to be hoes. Well, yeah, but you also were a hoe too, Stephen. You were a hoe too. Are you going to talk about the finances? Because that's the one... Yeah, I already did, babes. I already did. That's the very first thing I covered. So I've covered, for your benefit, we covered at the beginning the financial aspect, and then we covered the time aspect, which is very important, but you still have time to do other things as well for those who want to develop their skills. And now we're talking about, like, the actual aspects of finding a woman who's worth raising a family with. I have heard Jesus could not exist in his true form on earth. He would kill everything with his beauty. Well, I mean, Jesus... Okay, how do we put this? Jesus is without form in the sense that he doesn't have, like, a physical... Like, God doesn't have a physical body. God exists independent of creation, and him having a body would limit him. So... this is getting very distracted. So, it's more because... It's more because... like, Jesus... Yeah, I suppose he could manifest himself, doesn't he? He does, though. Never mind, I'm just going to move on to stuff that's more related. This is a complicated question, I need to think about it. Do you like England? I'll be honest with you, I know it's in decline. Yeah, but you're probably miserable because you've slept with over 20 women. Because one of the things that a disordered attitude towards sexuality begets is depression. Like, I know that the country is declining. I can see as much. I think that my wife can provide her input in the chat, but I agree with you. But there's also many beautiful things. Like, we went to the local town and we got to see the countryside, and it's still incredibly beautiful. Which Discord was it, if you don't mind me asking? Like, you're not going to find you're probably not going to find a woman through the Discord that I did, because ours was like a group of friends. You know, it was about as close to a group of real life friends as you get on Discord, and really that's probably the most effective method of meeting a decent woman, and that's just being friends with people. But I love my country, and I love the people in it. I love them, and they are great. You know, we was kings. We was kings, and we still can be. But we have to do this stupid, like, arrogant dance and pretend as if we're better than the Americans when we're not. We're not better than the Americans. We don't work nearly as hard as the Americans. We're also we're not more intelligent than them as well. Like, just because we have these highfalutin, hoity-toity voices doesn't mean that we're brighter. We just have, like, this snark. And, like, what does snark do to a machine gun? Like, we conquered India, right? Not with our snarky voices and with our, like, hoity-toity. We conquered it because we were more aggressive than the natives. My wife is in the chat. What do you think about the migrant crisis? I think it's a problem. In terms of, like, an actually decent solution that would actually work, I can't think of one. Golden Surfer asks, this sounds like an interesting question. Is it worth it to move away from my family for a 60% higher salary in order to have better finances for my future kids? No. It would be a lot better for you to find a wife. I mean, I don't know your specific situation. I think if you're in a Western country, or if you're living in a place where you can provide the amenities of life. This could even be rent. It doesn't have to be an owned house. If you can buy books, decent numbers of books, provide entertainment, clothes, and stuff like that on what you're currently earning for the children, or you're in a position where you could be doing that very quickly. I would be focusing a lot more on finding a decent local woman. I think that moving away also might have the problem of disconnecting you from the society around you, because you can go and move away. Say you move to London or New York or somewhere like that. You're going to end up like an anonymous person among 12 million others, and there aren't very strong community bonds. So it's a lot harder. You might have a better base socially in your home place. I don't know enough about you, though, to be honest. Did you talk... Okay, so my wife has asked me, did you talk about how tax burden is greatest towards families where there's a sole earner? No, I didn't. I don't know that much about it. I think that's more your thing, honey. Are you Miss Renaissance Man? Yes, she is. She is Miss Renaissance Man. The government makes the greatest amount of money where both parents are working, which is bad for children who are very young. Yeah, you have to be willing... Like, you don't need that much money to raise a kid, but you're not going to be like this... I mean, aside from maybe those who are lucky, those who know people, and those who are already extremely competent, you're not going to be extremely wealthy on a single salary, and you don't need to be. Do you believe that people moving from their hometowns or village and moving to the cities is a problem? I think it causes problems for them, potentially, but I don't... I mean, like, I spent most of my life in a commuter village around London, and there wasn't much of a community there, to be honest. So, but it might be different if you're, say, from a rural village in Wales. You might actually have a stronger community there, in which case, aside from the Methodism, it might be worth it to get away from the Methodism. But, like social ties are so important. They cannot be overestimated. Like any money that you earn in London, you might... Say you're a software developer and you go and work in AI for some sort of, like large company, and you're earning 150,000 US a year. How much of that is going to go into you paying your rent? How much of that is going to go into, like just the city lifestyle? Because you'll live like a degenerate. And I don't mean that in the sense that you'll be constantly in the nightclub getting drunk and like sleeping around. I mean that in the sense that you're going to be living off of takeaway probably. You're probably going to be stuck in your tiny little apartment, or your tiny little flat, and like crying. And you're going to do that for like however long you need to raise your money, right? Like, you could do that, or you could stay where you are, take a job that doesn't earn as much, and meet a local girl. I mean Methodism, like as in the Christian denomination of Methodism, it was at least quite strong in Wales at one point. I think Wales is actually one of the more atheistic places in the UK now, actually. I think more so than knowing your own history and the culture of country, having people, or even knowing them, is more, your grandparents will affect you more. I mean, I would not be the man I am today without my grandfather. My grandfather, he was unfortunately not a Catholic. He was an Anglican theologian. And he was also one of the most masculine men I've ever seen. Like before my wife and I got married, he died, and his last impactful action on this planet was to build a pond in his back garden, and he put more work into it than the bloody contractor he hired to build the pond. Like, this contractor just kept on going off to his bloody girlfriend, and instead of doing the work, and he built this pond, and he must have been 82, and building this pond in his back garden, he did a load of the work. Wonderful, wonderfully conscientious, very masculine man. Do you worry about the world your baby will be growing up in? To some extent, yeah, but we can also mitigate and control the influences to some extent. We don't have to throw the kid in front of Cocomelon if we don't want to, and we can make friends with people who are better than that. On the other hand, it's also, I think, I have yet to actually figure out where the sweet spot in this lay, but I think them having some conception of the secular world may actually help them in the sense that it inoculates them against it. Yeah, I mean, that's the very first time that the wife and I met, but the time that we started to really start talking to each other, actually, was we had a rather intense argument over null hypothesis statistical testing and its impact on the reliability of psychological studies. And then it was like plain sailing from there. I mean, like there's always been degenerates. There will always be degenerates. There's a lot of them now, and you know, I'm not gonna let that stop me have kids. Do you think that Britain will be forever secular? No, I don't. I don't even think it's really necessarily. I mean, what even is secular? Like, what even do people believe in Britain? Because, like, maybe only 10% of them are actually atheists. Most of them believe in some sort of, like, woo or magics, or, like, they have special crystals. They believe in reincarnation. Some of them are just, like, extremely lax Protestants. I mean, I'm talking about the white people here. You know, it's not really as simple as like, well, they're secular. Alright, so we've been going for about 50 minutes now. Basically, like, the crux of what I'm saying when it comes to a woman as well, actually, that's something I probably should cover. Like, looks maxing isn't actually going to make much of a difference. It may make some difference, but it's not the be-all and end-all. What's going to be much more important is, like, you know, you get yourself in the door with the looks, right? You can perhaps keep a woman's attention for a couple weeks on looks, but it's going to be ultimately your character that's going to sustain any kind of decent relationship, unless she's like got something wrong with her. Like, I mean, if she's still with you because you're attractive and you're like just sleeping with all sorts of other women, like there's something wrong with her. What's your opinion on liberalism? Like what kind? There are degenerates in every age, no novelty under the sun here. Yeah, like I think the only difference really now is that like people, the church is less present in life. People think that they know what the church is, but they don't. Lots of things are immediately more accessible. All the good women my age are married. I'm 28 and beginning to feel elderly. Well, you can always pray. The average Brit believes only two things. White people are evil and killing babies is good. I don't know about white people are evil. They certainly believe that killing babies are good, I imagine. Or at least they're tolerable so that a woman can have her freedom, or whatever that means. Like, I mean, wow. Like, it's like people believing in free thought. It's like, well, what's the point of free thought if you're wrong? Like why would you want to have your own like thoughts if you're just wrong? There are young women in your church. Yeah, I mean, go to universities, get involved in social activities, man. Like so much of this is just going to be building networks of people, and I understand that this part of the internet is filled with nerds, and many of you are kind of autistic, but really you have to overpower that and just interact with people. Like that's the way out of this. You know, like you don't have to be Chad. I think it helps. But just getting involved with charities, getting involved just really in anything, like building your skills out, you know, stuff like that. Like not just like being caught in like what is barely above neat life, where you go to work, do the bare minimum, and then come home and play video games. What do I think about fascism? Like what form? Because like fascism wasn't really a united movement. They were different between different countries. Right. So I think this is probably where I'll leave it. Unless anybody's got any final questions, I'm going to give you about another minute, I think, and then we'll see. I mean, one advice from my parish priest that really made me meditate was that your future wife and kids will be a blessing, not something you can control, as in wish for one and there she is. What do you think about Iola? Was he right? I mean, again, on what? Like I don't particularly like Iola. I feel like Iola. I mean, I've only read Revolt Against the Modern World, and I read a few years ago some of his essays, and I read like Handbook on Right Wing Youth, which I thought was too abstract to be of any serious use. I think that he didn't know what he was talking about when it came to Christianity. I think that, I mean, I've heard good things about his scholarship on Buddhism. I don't understand why you'd entrust your movement to somebody like that. I think that there are much better uses of your time, because, like, Stephen, you are going to die someday. Why are you reading Iola and these people when you could be reading St. Thomas and St. Augustine and people who actually had serious impact on the world? It was a jest. I'm from a nominally Catholic country with the majority of women and ladies over 50. I mean, that's the thing. I thought that Iola was paralyzed by an American bomb. I didn't know it was the Soviets. But yeah, like the final the final answer to the woman question is just going out there, meeting women, and trying, getting into decent shape would help. I don't think it's as matters as much as people tend to think. But what matters really is humility, gentleness, and kindness. Because you might not get like some very attractive woman, but you don't need that. And honestly, like, looks are vain. As much as they hit to the core of a man in a way that is very hard to resist, like, they don't really do much for you, and there isn't really anything beyond. There's no like female good looks are not a sign in the way I think that men sometimes read into them. They don't point to something higher. They just are. And I think that there's a certain expectation on the part of men sometimes that they do lead to something higher, but they don't. There are plenty of attractive women out there, and they're awful. They point to something worse. So I'm going to leave the stream here if no one else has any other questions. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.